It started with a knock, sharp, forceful, and way too official sounding for a quiet lake neighborhood. I had barely been in my new home for 3 days, still living out of boxes, when trouble showed up wearing a beige vest, a name tag, and holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. I opened the door and found a woman in her late 50s standing stiff like a soldier. 2 other people stood behind her, one tall guy wearing sunglasses at night, and another woman chewing gum like she was annoyed just to be alive. The lead woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good evening," she said. "I'm Janet, head of the HOA Compliance Committee." Her tone made it sound like she expected me to salute or something. I blinked. Okay. "Just doing our routine welcome for new residents," she said, handing me a folder. "This is your HOA welcome packet. All rules and expectations are in here. We keep Crestwood Estates beautiful, safe, and orderly." I glanced at the thick packet in my hands. "All right." Janet leaned closer and pointed to a highlighted section near the back. "One thing to note specifically, Section 8B. No residents are allowed to be outside their homes past 8 p.m. This includes driveways, porches, sidewalks. It's for safety and to avoid unnecessary disturbances." I squinted. "You're telling me I can't stand on my own porch after 8 o'clock? It's a unanimous rule voted in last year. Everyone complies. Keeps the community peaceful." I looked at her and then at the other 2. "And what if I need fresh air? Or I get a phone call? I can't just step outside?" "It's a safety policy," she repeated like a robot. "The last homeowner who disobeyed, let's just say, things didn't go well." "Was that a threat?" I nodded slowly, not wanting to escalate anything. "Got it," I said, closing the door gently. I tossed the packet onto the kitchen counter and didn't even open it. I didn't move to a lakefront house in a free country just to be told by some power-hungry HOA lady when I could breathe outdoor air. I figured it was just their little scare tactic to keep people quiet. So, I didn't think much of it. Until later that same night. At exactly 8:17 p.m., I stepped out onto my own front porch. I had just received a call from my cousin in Texas who was going through a messy breakup, and I didn't want to talk inside the house because I hadn't unpacked properly yet and everything echoed. I stood out there, barefoot, in a hoodie, just minding my own business. No noise. No music. Not even a light on except for the porch bulb. And then I saw it. 3 shadows moved across the street, slowly creeping toward my lawn. It was Janet, the tall sunglasses guy, and the gum-chewing clipboard woman, again. But this time, they weren't smiling. "You're in violation," Janet snapped. I lowered my phone from my ear. "Excuse me? You are outside your home. It is after 8 p.m. That is a direct violation of the HOA regulation." I looked around. "You mean standing here? On my own porch?" "The rule includes porches," she said. "All outdoor activity must cease by 8 p.m. I couldn't help but scoff. "That's not a law. That's not even enforceable. You agreed to the HOA charter when you bought this house," the tall guy said. "You don't get to pick and choose. I'm not causing a disturbance. I'm just standing here. You're the ones crossing the street at night to harass me." Clipboard lady stepped forward, waving a printed paper like it meant something. "We're issuing you a first strike. One more violation and it's a $250 fine." "For what?" I said. "You can't fine someone for standing on their own porch." "It's all in the packet," Janet replied. "And if you continue resisting, we'll have no choice but to escalate." I was stunned. It felt like I was being watched in my own home. These people were seriously acting like I was a criminal for breathing fresh air. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "You've made your point," I said. "Now get off my property." They didn't move. We're allowed to monitor compliance, Janet said smugly. From the sidewalk maybe. Not from my lawn. That's when things escalated. The tall guy took a step toward me. Sir, please go back inside. I raised my hands. You touch me, and we have a real problem. I'm giving you one last warning, Janet said, pointing her finger in my face. Step inside, or we will act according to HOA enforcement protocol. I was still trying to figure out if this was a joke. Enforcement protocol? I repeated. What are you going to do? Arrest me? Clipboard lady muttered, we've done it before. I looked at them, still stunned, and said, you know what? I'm calling the police. You're joking, Janet hissed. No, I said, pulling out my phone. You come onto my property at night, you threaten me, you try to tell me I can't step outside? That's harassment. As soon as I said 911, I saw them flinch. But I wasn't bluffing. I tapped the emergency button and spoke to the dispatcher. Yes, this is Daniel Reeve at 742 Sycamore Lane. I have 3 people on my porch claiming to be HOA enforcers. They're refusing to leave and threatening me because I stepped outside after 8 p.m. Janet suddenly looked nervous. You're seriously calling the cops? She asked. You seriously followed me to my front porch at night like a gang, I snapped. Let's see what the police think. The dispatcher stayed on the line. I described what happened. Gave their names. Within 5 minutes, I saw headlights turn onto my street. Blue and red lights flashing. Janet whispered something to her crew. I heard clipboard lady say, he's making a big deal out of nothing. No. I wasn't. This was my home. My porch. My freedom. And tonight? They messed with the wrong guy. The flashing lights were like a wake-up call for the entire street. Within seconds of the first cruiser pulling up, porch lights flicked on up and down Sycamore Lane. Curtains shifted. Neighbors peeked through blinds. It was quiet before, but now the whole neighborhood was watching. Janet and her little HOA crew took a few steps back, pretending like they had just been out for a casual stroll, like they hadn't just cornered me on my own porch for daring to breathe fresh air after sunset. The first officer stepped out of the cruiser. Tall, built like a linebacker, and not in the mood for nonsense. He shined his flashlight toward the 3 of them before turning to me. Sir, you made the call? I nodded. Yes, officer. I live here. These 3 approached me on my porch, told me I was breaking some HOA curfew rule, and tried to force me back into my house. Before I could say anything more, Janet jumped in, holding her clipboard like a badge of authority. Officer, this man is in violation of the community's mandatory quiet hours. He was warned earlier. He's being non-compliant. The officer didn't even blink. Ma'am, is this your property? No, she admitted, shifting uncomfortably. Then you had no right to be on his porch after dark, HOA or not. We have neighborhood authority, she snapped, trying to hold her ground. The second patrol car pulled up, and out stepped a female sergeant who looked like she'd seen 100 HOA Karens in her career. She approached calmly, surveying the scene. Someone want to explain why a homeowner is calling in a harassment complaint on day 3 of moving in? I stepped down from my porch and repeated the story. They told me I wasn't allowed outside after 8 p.m. Then they showed up when I was taking a phone call, came onto my porch, and physically tried to push me back inside. I called 911 because I don't feel safe. The sergeant narrowed her eyes at the 3 of them. Did you put hands on him? Janet looked offended. We were simply enforcing neighborhood regulations. That's a yes or no question. Clipboard lady finally spoke. He wasn't cooperating. He mocked the rules. We had to guide him inside before things got out of hand. The male officer turned to me. Do you have any video, sir? Ring camera? Security footage? I have a doorbell cam, yes. It recorded everything. Perfect, the sergeant said. We'll take a look. Janet tried again. Officer, we're just trying to maintain the community standard. He knew the rule and chose to ignore it. This could have been avoided. The sergeant turned slowly toward her. Even if your HOA had such a rule, and that's a big if, it doesn't override state or federal law. There's no law that says a man can't stand on his own porch after dark. And unless you have a restraining order or probable cause, putting your hands on someone makes you the criminal. Sunglasses guy suddenly didn't look so confident. He stepped back, muttering something about needing to call the HOA lawyer. Yeah, you might want to do that, the officer said. Because this is starting to sound a lot like attempted assault, trespassing, and harassment. Janet, realizing she was losing control, switched gears. We just wanted him to understand the expectations. He was making a scene, neighbors have been complaining. Neighbors are complaining now, the officer said, pointing to all the windows with eyes behind them. But not about him. About you. I glanced around and noticed several neighbors standing on their porches, watching everything unfold. One guy across the street gave me a thumbs up. Another older woman shook her head at Janet with obvious disgust. That's when the officer turned back to me. You want to press charges? I thought for a second. I wasn't looking to drag this out, but I also wasn't about to let people walk all over me. Not yet, I said. But I want this incident documented. Fully. You got it. The sergeant nodded to her partner, who started writing up the report. They asked for everyone's names, took statements, and even requested copies of the HOA's supposed rule packet. The best part? When Janet proudly handed over the printed HOA rulebook, the officer flipped right to Section 8B, and laughed. This isn't even official, he said. It's a page taped into the back of a completely different document. And it's not signed by any legal representative. It's part of our internal enforcement, Janet said defensively. It's not enforceable, the sergeant replied flatly. Not by you, not by your HOA, and definitely not by shoving someone on their own porch. They told the trio to leave my property immediately. Janet tried to say one last thing, but the sergeant shut her down with a simple, "Ma'am, step away or I'll escort you myself." Clipboard lady was nearly in tears. Sunglasses guy was already walking away. I stood there in disbelief as the cops got back in their cruisers. Before they left, the sergeant came over and handed me a card. File a formal complaint if you want. This isn't the first time we've been called here over HOA power trips. Seriously? Yep. A few months ago, they tried to stop a teenager from using his skateboard in his own driveway. Last year, they sent out warnings for families grilling past 7 p.m. But no one ever stood up to them. Well, I said, pocketing the card, that stops now. The sergeant smiled. Good. Someone needed to. As the cruisers pulled away, I stood alone on my porch. Still barefoot. Still outside. It was 8:55 p.m. I raised my phone, checked the time, and laughed out loud. I wasn't moving an inch. Let them try again. This time, I'd be ready. The next morning, I didn't even need coffee. The events from the night before were still burning hot in my brain. Being jumped, on my own porch, by a bunch of self-appointed HOA vigilantes. I wasn't going to let it go. I had bruises on my wrist, a scratch on my elbow, and a camera full of evidence. And most importantly, I had backup now, the law was officially involved. But before I could even think about what to do next, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was early, barely 8 a.m. I opened it cautiously, expecting round 2 of the HOA harassment patrol. Instead, I found a quiet-looking man in his 40s wearing a baseball cap and holding a coffee thermos. He looked around nervously, then said, "Hey. I saw what happened last night." I stepped out onto the porch, curious. "Yeah? I live 3 houses down," he said, pointing. "Name's Chris. Just wanted to say, you're not alone. Janet's been running this neighborhood like a prison for years. Most of us are afraid to speak up." That got my attention. "So she's done this before?" He nodded. "Not this crazy, but close. One time she fined my wife for putting up Halloween lights too early. Another guy got a citation for washing his truck on a Sunday. No one ever calls her out because she's connected with the HOA president, her brother or something." I whistled. "Sounds like a dictatorship." "That's exactly what it is. You just had the guts to say no." Chris left me with one more sentence before walking off: "If you go after her, we've got your back." That was all I needed to hear. I called my lawyer and forwarded him everything: my doorbell camera footage, the police report number, even a scan of the bogus fine they tried to hand me. He reviewed the HOA charter line by line and confirmed what the officers had already hinted at. This curfew rule was never legally ratified, he told me over the phone. They wrote it themselves, stuffed it in an outdated rulebook, and tried to enforce it like it was law. Totally unenforceable. And the assault? Oh, that's real. If you wanted to, we could file charges today. The footage shows physical contact, clear violation of personal space, and an attempt to detain you unlawfully. I wasn't sure about going the legal route, yet. But I wanted something better. I wanted the entire HOA leadership exposed for what they were. Not just to punish them, but to stop this madness from ever happening again. So I did what any calm, thinking homeowner would do. I organized. Within 2 days, I had printed flyers and gone door to door. I invited every homeowner on the block to a special, open forum HOA meeting at my place the next Saturday. No agenda, no rules, just neighbors talking, freely. The response was overwhelming. By the weekend, I had over 30 people show up. Some brought snacks, others brought lawn chairs. For the first time since moving in, I felt like I actually belonged to a community. One that had just been silenced under HOA pressure for too long. One by one, people spoke. A single mother talked about being fined for leaving her porch light on after 9 p.m. A retired veteran shared how Janet accused him of violating lawn decor regulations because he flew a small American flag in his garden. One man revealed that he was threatened with legal action for letting his 12-year-old son ride a bicycle past the HOA president's house after 7:30 p.m. It was unbelievable. I kept a running list of every abuse, every fine, every threat that had happened in the last 2 years. The pattern was clear: Janet and her small group were running the HOA like it was a personal power project. And then it happened: Janet showed up. Halfway through the meeting, she came storming into my backyard like she still had control over everyone. She was red-faced, furious, and holding a stack of paper. "You can't hold unauthorized HOA meetings," she shouted. "This is a violation." Someone laughed. Someone else said, "It's a backyard barbecue, Janet. Relax." She turned to me. "You think this little rebellion is going to scare me?" "No," I said. "But the police report, the legal review, the 30 witnesses, and the video evidence might." I could see it in her eyes. The moment she realized she was no longer feared. No longer in charge. She tried to hand me a cease and desist letter, but I didn't take it. I didn't need to. The entire neighborhood had already turned on her. Someone shouted, "Janet, we're done letting you bully us." Another neighbor added, "We want a new board. New leadership." The backyard practically erupted in agreement. Janet stood frozen for a moment, then turned and stormed away. Her little reign of terror was officially crumbling. That night, I received over a dozen emails from neighbors asking how to support a recall vote. Some sent photos of old finds, others sent their own video clips of Janet patrolling the streets after dark like she was security. One message stood out. It was from an elderly couple who'd lived in Crestwood Estates for 22 years. "Thank you for reminding us this is still our home," it said. That message hit different. Because that's exactly what I came here for, to live in peace. Now I knew, the only way to get that peace, was to finish this fight. The vote was coming. The community was united. And this time, I wasn't standing on my porch alone. I was standing with everyone who had ever been silenced. The recall vote was set for the following Saturday. Word spread fast, faster than I expected. Turns out, all it takes to shake up a power-drunk HOA is one neighbor refusing to stay silent. In just 1 week, our sleepy, rule-ridden lakefront community turned into a buzzing hive of neighbors printing signs, knocking on doors, and trading stories of HOA abuse like war veterans comparing scars. People were fired up. Finally, they felt heard. The night before the vote, I got a knock on my door again. But this time, it wasn't Janet or her sidekicks. It was a tall man in a polo shirt and glasses, Mr. Ellison, the HOA president. I stepped outside, arms crossed. "Let me guess, you're here to ask me to back off." He sighed. "No. I'm here because, it's over. Janet's resigning." I blinked. "Seriously?" "She called me after that meeting. Said she's tired, doesn't want to deal with the ungovernable mob anymore. She's stepping down before the vote happens." "So she jumped before she got thrown out." He smirked. "Pretty much. I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt calm. Like I had finally finished something important." Ellison told me the rest of the board was reviewing all the old fines, reversing most of them, and planning to remove several outdated rules that were never legally enforceable, including the ridiculous 8 p.m. outdoor ban. Then he added, "You should think about joining the new board. People trust you now." I didn't say yes right away. But I also didn't say no. The next morning, the vote still happened, just to make everything official. Janet wasn't there. Clipboard lady had already moved out earlier in the week. According to gossip, she couldn't deal with the neighborhood turning against her. Sunglasses guy. No one had seen him since the police showed up on my porch. Probably hiding in a garage somewhere, waiting for things to cool down. In Janet's place, a soft-spoken neighbor named Grace volunteered to fill the empty seat. She was the opposite of Janet, gentle, fair, and not addicted to control. She promised one thing in her short speech: this HOA will never make you feel like a prisoner in your own home again. The whole crowd clapped. Loud. And then it was done. Weeks passed. The air around Crestwood Estates felt lighter. Kids played outside again past 8 p.m. People walked their dogs at night without looking over their shoulders. Porch lights stayed on. And my favorite change? Everyone started hanging out more. I got invited to backyard barbecues, morning coffee walks, even a poker night hosted by the retired firefighter 2 doors down. But the best moment? It came one Friday night, around 8:15 p.m. I stepped out onto my porch, just like before, phone in hand, tea in the other. I leaned against the railing and breathed in the lake air. Peaceful. Still. And then, one by one, neighbors came out too. First Chris, the guy who warned me about Janet. Then Grace, waving from across the street. Then the veteran with the flagpole, raising a glass in my direction. Within 5 minutes, it felt like the entire block was outside. Porch lights glowed. Laughter echoed. Kids played catch in the street. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't defiance. It was something better. It was freedom. That dumb 8 p.m. rule may have started this war, but it ended with a neighborhood finally standing up for itself. One neighbor at a time. One voice at a time. One porch at a time. And me? I still stand outside most nights. Not to make a statement, but because I can. I earned that right back. And I'll never let anyone take it again. Sometimes, people ask me if I ever regret getting involved. If I ever wish I'd just stayed inside and ignored Janet and her clipboard army. Nope. Because the truth is, if you don't stand up to bullies, especially the ones hiding behind fake authority, they only get bolder. And if you don't defend your front porch, one day, you'll wake up and realize you don't own your own life anymore. So yes, the HOA banned me from going outside after 8 p.m. And yes, they jumped me when I didn't obey. But I called the cops. And I called out their lies. And today? I own that porch. I own my peace. And now, the whole street does too.